The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal. 847 different species had representatives, sitting in the curved seats that rose toward the dome ceiling. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Kethler adjusted his ceremonial robes as he stood at the central podium. His blue-scaled face showed the calm confidence that came from centuries of diplomatic experience. As chair of the Military Ethics Committee, he took great pride in the work they had accomplished over the past millennium. Fellow council members, Kethler began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. Today marks the 1000th anniversary of the Codex of Civilized Warfare. 1,000 years since we as a galactic community decided that conflicts between our peoples would be conducted with honor, restraint, and respect for life. Polite applause echoed through the chamber. Representatives from hundreds of worlds nodded their various heads, tentacles, and sensory organs in agreement. The Codex was their greatest achievement, the document that separated them from the savage civilizations of the past, in the observation deck high above. Military historians from the University of Centauri Prime watched the ceremony with interest. They had spent decades studying the evolution of warfare across the galaxy. The statistics were impressive. Before the Codex, wars between species often lasted for generations and killed billions. Now, the average interstellar conflict lasted less than 6 months and resulted in fewer than 50,000 casualties total. The most recent example was the ongoing dispute between the Zephyrian Empire and the Crystalline Confederacy. Both sides called it the 100-Year War, though it was more of a 100-year series of very polite disagreements. Every few years, they would have a formal battle over control of the Kepler mining zone. Ships would engage in carefully planned combat. Some would be damaged beyond repair, others would be captured. A few hundred soldiers might die on each side. When one fleet retreated, both sides would count their losses and negotiate. Territory would change hands based on a complex formula that considered military losses, strategic objectives achieved, and economic factors. The defeated side would formally acknowledge their loss, pay appropriate compensation, and everyone would go home until the next scheduled conflict. It was civilized. It was logical. Most importantly, it prevented the total destruction that had once plagued the galaxy. The Codex protects not just soldiers, but entire civilizations, Kethler continued. Rule 7 clearly states that civilian populations must never be deliberately targeted. Rule 15 requires that all combatants be given opportunity to surrender with honor. Rule 23 mandates that cultural sites and civilian infrastructure be preserved whenever possible. In the Zephyrian section of the Great Hall, General Mordek listened with satisfaction. His people had written many of those rules after their own dark period of unlimited warfare. 2,000 years ago, the Zephyrians had nearly destroyed themselves in a civil war that consumed entire star systems. The survivors had sworn never to let such destruction happen again. The Crystalline Confederacy representatives sparkled in the filtered light as they adjusted their mineral-based bodies. They too had learned the value of restraint. Their crystal cities were beautiful but fragile. Unlimited warfare would mean the end of their architectural heritage that had taken millions of years to grow. But perhaps most important, Kethler said, raising his voice slightly, is Rule 1 of the Codex. No conflict shall continue once one side formally requests cessation of hostilities. This rule has prevented countless deaths and ended every major war in our recorded history within reasonable time limits. The ambassador paused to let his words sink in. Around the Great Hall, beings from hundreds of different evolutionary paths nodded in agreement. They had created something unprecedented in galactic history, a universal system for limiting the damage of war. Dr. Yelzana from the Pacifist Coalition stood to ask a question. Our people had never fought a war in their entire evolution, preferring negotiation and compromise to violence. Ambassador Keflar, what happens when we encounter species that have not yet learned these principles? How do we guide them towards civilized conduct? It was a good question. The galaxy was vast, and new civilizations still emerged from time to time. Most required only gentle guidance to understand the benefits of limited warfare. A few had to learn through experience, usually after losing their first civilized conflict to an established power. The process is well established, Keflar replied. New species are given full access to the Codex during first contact procedures. Our diplomatic corps explains the benefits of civilized warfare. In most cases, they quickly see the wisdom of our approach. Representative Thox from the warrior clans of Rigel added his own perspective. Despite their fierce appearance and combat traditions, even the warrior clans had adapted to civilized warfare. Young species often mistake our restraint for weakness, he growled through his translator. They learn quickly that disciplined, limited warfare requires more skill than mindless destruction. The ceremony continued with testimonials from various species about how the Codex had improved their lives. The insectoid hive mothers spoke about how their warrior drones could now be used for construction instead of endless wars. The energy beings of the Plasma Consortium explained how they had redirected their aggressive impulses into competitive sports instead of territorial expansion. As the formal presentations ended, the council moved to new business. At the top of the agenda was a report from the Deep Space Monitoring Division. Long-range sensors had detected signs of a new spacefaring civilization in a previously unexplored region of the galaxy. Commander Veltar of the Monitoring Division activated a holographic display showing a small yellow star with several planets. The system is designated Sol 1 in our charts. We have confirmed artificial signals consistent with early space travel technology. Based on electromagnetic emissions, the dominant species appears to be carbon-based and likely mammalian. The news caused a stir of interest throughout the chamber. First contact with new civilizations was always exciting. It meant new trading partners, fresh perspectives, and often fascinating cultural exchanges. Have they achieved faster-than-light travel yet? Asked Ambassador Keflar. Our latest observations suggest they are very close to breakthrough, Commander Veltar replied. We estimate first contact within the next 6 months to 2 years. The council members began discussing first contact protocols. The process was standardized and peaceful. A small diplomatic vessel would approach the new species' home system, broadcast universal greeting signals, and wait for a response. Usually, the newcomers were eager to join the galactic community once they understood the benefits. As the session ended, and representatives began filing out of the Great Hall. None of them suspected that this routine first contact would challenge everything they believed about civilized warfare. They had no way of knowing that somewhere in the Sol system, a species was preparing to emerge into galactic affairs with a very different understanding of what war actually meant. The galaxy slept peacefully that night, secure in the knowledge that the age of total warfare was long behind them. They were about to discover how wrong they could be. The UES Endeavour dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Council space with all the grace of a falling brick. Captain Sarah Chun watched the navigation displays with barely concealed embarrassment as her ship wobbled through the final approach to Station Harmony, the Galactic Council's primary diplomatic facility. Sorry about that, Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the helm. Our FTL drive is still pretty rough around the edges. The engineers back home said it might take a few more years to work out the bugs. Sarah nodded and straightened her dress uniform. Humanity's first contact with galactic civilization and they had arrived looking like amateurs. She hoped the alien diplomats would understand that humans were still learning. Station Harmony was unlike anything in human experience. The massive structure stretched for dozens of kilometers in every direction. Its crystalline spires and flowing organic curves, clearly designed by minds that thought very differently from humans. Ships of hundreds of different designs moved in and out of docking bays, creating a constant ballet of interstellar traffic. Incoming. Transmission from Station Control, announced. Communications Officer Park. The main screen filled with the image of a being that looked like a cross between a dolphin and a butterfly. Its translator device rendered its whistling sounds into clear English. Welcome to Station Harmony, Vessel Endeavor. I am Port Authority Director Sil Wynn. We have been expecting you. Please proceed to Diplomatic Base 7 for initial processing. Sarah stepped forward. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Endeavor. On behalf of humanity, I want to thank the Galactic Council for this opportunity. The honor is ours, Captain Chun. First contact is always a celebration for our community. We look forward to learning about your species. As the Endeavor settled into the assigned docking bay, Sarah gathered her diplomatic team. They had trained for this moment for 5 years, studying every scrap of information their long-range telescopes and radio receivers had gathered about galactic civilization. Dr. Amanda Foster, their chief cultural specialist, carried a tablet loaded with human history, art, and science. Remember, we want to present ourselves as a peaceful species ready to contribute to galactic society. We're here to learn, not to make demands. The docking tube connected with a soft thud, and moments later the first alien being stepped aboard the Endeavor. Sarah had seen pictures, but meeting them in person was still startling. Ambassador Kethlar towered over the humans with his blue scales gleaming under the ship's lights. Behind him came a delegation of 6 other species, each more unusual than the last. Captain Chun, Kethlar said, his voice surprisingly warm through the translator. Welcome to the galactic community. We are honored to meet the representatives of Earth. The formal ceremonies took place in Station Harmony's great reception hall. Sarah found herself standing before an audience of beings from across the galaxy, all eager to learn about humanity. The questions came fast and friendly. What is your species' primary form of government? Asked a crystalline being that sparkled as it moved. We're still working that out, Sarah admitted. Earth is about 200 different nations, each with their own system. We're trying to build a unified world government, but it's taking time. The aliens nodded knowingly. Political evolution was apparently a common challenge for developing species. What about your economic system? Inquired a floating gas bag creature with dozens of sensory tentacles. Dr. Foster stepped forward for this one. Humans use several different approaches. Some nations prefer free markets, others favor more centralized planning. We're still experimenting to find what works best. Again, understanding nods from the audience. Economic diversity was normal for young civilizations. The questions continued for hours. The aliens wanted to know about human art, science, philosophy, and culture. Sarah's team answered as best they could, painting a picture of humanity as an energetic but still developing species, eager to learn from their galactic neighbors. It was when Ambassador Kethlar asked about human history that things got more complex. All species go through periods of conflict during their development. Kethlar said gently, we are curious about how humanity resolved its internal disputes. Sarah exchanged glances with Dr. Foster. They had debated how much to reveal about human warfare. Too much detail might alarm their new allies. Too little might make them seem naive. Well, Sarah began carefully. We've had our share of conflicts. 2 major global wars in the 20th century. Various smaller conflicts since then. We're still working on solving disagreements peacefully. Global wars? Asked a representative from the Hive Collective, her insectoid features showing interest. Were these territorial disputes between your nations? Among other things, Dr. Foster replied. The first global war killed about 17 million people. The second was worse, around 70 million dead. A ripple of surprise went through the alien delegation. Those were significant numbers for any species. How did you resolve these conflicts? Kefler asked. Did you establish territorial boundaries through negotiated settlement? Sarah hesitated. Human warfare didn't really work that way. The conflicts ended when one side was completely defeated. In the Second War, we actually used nuclear weapons, atomic bombs that destroyed entire cities. The aliens looked shocked, but not horrified. They seemed to view it as a regrettable phase in human development, like a childhood disease that most species eventually outgrow. Fortunately, those dark days are behind you, said Representative Thox from the warrior clans. Your species has clearly learned the value of restraint. That wisdom will serve you well in the galactic community. Sarah didn't correct his assumption. Humans had indeed become more careful about nuclear weapons, but not necessarily more restrained about warfare in general. Over the following days, the integration process continued. Human diplomats attended briefings on galactic law, trade regulations, and cultural protocols. They were given copies of the Codex of Civilized Warfare and other important documents. This is remarkable, Dr. Foster said as she studied the Codex in their temporary quarters. They've turned warfare into something like a sport. Rules, limits, predetermined outcomes. It's almost elegant. Sarah read over her shoulder. Look at Rule 15. All combatants must be given opportunity to surrender with full honors. And Rule 23 about preserving civilian infrastructure. These people have really figured out how to fight wars without destroying everything. It makes sense, commented Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had joined them for the evening briefing. If you were going to share a galaxy with hundreds of other species, you need some way to resolve disputes without wiping each other out. The breakthrough moment came when the Korthic hegemony offered humanity its first opportunity to participate in galactic politics. General Mordak himself extended the invitation during a formal dinner aboard his flagship. The hegemony has a seasonal campaign beginning next month against the Outer Rim separatists, he explained, his massive frame making the dining table seem small. It would honor us to have human vessels participate as our allies. Sarah leaned forward with interest. What kind of campaign? Standard territorial dispute, Mordak replied casually. The separatists claim independence from the hegemony every few years. We respond with appropriate force to remind them of their obligations. Usually takes 3 months, minimal casualties on both sides. Good training for your crews. How minimal? Dr. Foster asked. Last campaign resulted in 437 total casualties, Mordak said with pride. Very clean operation. Both sides conducted themselves with honor. Sarah tried to process this information. 400 deaths to resolve a territorial dispute involving multiple star systems seemed incredibly low by human standards. We would be honored to participate, she said finally. Our crews could certainly use the experience of working alongside galactic military forces. As the evening ended and the humans returned to their quarters, none of them realized they had just accepted humanity's first step toward a demonstration that would shock the galaxy. They thought they were joining a civilized conflict with clear rules and limited objectives. They had no idea that their new allies were about to discover what happened when someone attacked human beings and expected a civilized response. The Outer Rim separatists were going about their daily business, preparing for another routine rebellion that would end with the traditional negotiated settlement. They had no way of knowing that this time. Their opponents included a species that viewed war very differently than the rest of the galaxy. The stage was set for a collision between two completely different philosophies of warfare, and only one of them was going to survive the encounter. The cargo vessel New Horizons was not a military ship. It carried families, colonists heading to establish humanity's second settlement outside the Sol system. 847 people had packed their lives into the converted freighter, dreaming of new worlds and fresh starts. Captain Maria Santos had taken the shipping lane through contested space because it cut 2 weeks off their journey. The area was technically disputed territory between the Korthic hegemony and the Outer Rim separatists, but conflicts in the region were always limited and civilized. According to galactic law, civilian vessels had free passage, even during active campaigns. She never saw the separatist raiders coming. The attack happened at 14:30 ship time. 3 separatist vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately opened fire on the New Horizons without any warning or identification request. The cargo ship's weak shields collapsed within seconds. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but it was too late for most of the ship. Captain Santos had just enough time to send a distress signal before the bridge lost power. The message was simple and desperate. Mayday, mayday. This is cargo vessel New Horizons. We are under attack by unknown vessels. We are carrying civilians only. Please help us. The signal reached the nearest Korthic patrol ship 18 minutes later. By the time rescue vessels arrived, there was nothing left but debris and frozen bodies drifting through space. Queen Syrah received the report 6 hours later aboard her command ship on the edge of separatist territory. The insectoid ruler had been planning the next phase of their routine rebellion when her military advisor brought the devastating news. The raiders claimed they thought it was a disguised military transport. The advisor chittered nervously. They say the ship was using false civilian markings. Queen Syrah's compound eyes reflected the lights of her throne room as she processed this information. The destruction of a genuine civilian vessel was a serious violation of the Codex of Civilized Warfare. More importantly, it could trigger real consequences from the Galactic Council. Prepare formal apologies immediately, she ordered. Full restitution according to galactic law. 10,000 credits per casualty. Public acknowledgement of error and punishment of the responsible raiders. It was the standard response to accidental civilian deaths. Throughout galactic history, such incidents have been resolved through proper diplomatic channels. The mistake was regrettable, but not worth escalating into a major conflict. The formal apology reached human space within 12 hours. Ambassador Keflar personally delivered it to Captain Chun aboard Station Harmony, along with detailed explanations of how such matters were traditionally handled. The Separatists have offered maximum restitution under galactic law, Keflar explained. 8,470,000 credits total, plus public acknowledgement of their error. Queen Syrah has also agreed to have the responsible raiders stripped of rank and exiled from their territory. Sarah stared at the document in disbelief. The aliens were offering money for the lives of 800 human beings, as if they were discussing damaged cargo. This is it? She asked quietly. Credits and an apology? It is the standard resolution for such incidents, Keflar replied, seeming puzzled by her reaction. The amount exceeds the usual compensation rate, showing the Separatists' genuine regret for this unfortunate mistake. Dr. Foster leaned forward. Ambassador Keflar, I think there may be a cultural misunderstanding here. In human society, the deliberate killing of civilians is considered one of the most serious crimes possible. Of course, Keflar agreed, which is why the restitution is so generous. The Separatists are clearly taking this matter seriously. Sarah stood up from the conference table, her hands trembling with suppressed anger. They murdered our people. Children were on that ship. Families starting new lives. And you think money makes that acceptable? The alien diplomat's expression showed genuine confusion. Captain Chun, I understand your emotional response. The loss of life is always tragic. But accidents happen in warfare. The important thing is that the responsible party has acknowledged their error and offered appropriate compensation. Appropriate compensation, Sarah repeated slowly. For murder. For an unfortunate mistake during a limited conflict, Keflar corrected gently. The raiders have been punished according to separatist law. The Queen has formally apologized. The matter is resolved under all recognized galactic protocols. Sarah turned to look out the viewport at the stars beyond Station Harmony. Somewhere out there, the people who had killed her fellow humans were going about their business as usual, confident that a formal apology and some money had settled the matter. No, she said finally. I beg your pardon. Keflar asked. Sarah turned back to face the alien ambassador. No, this matter is not resolved. We do not accept your compensation. We do not accept their apology. And we certainly do not consider this an unfortunate mistake that can be swept away with credits. Dr. Foster touched Sarah's arm gently. Captain, perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any formal response. But Sarah was beyond diplomatic caution. The faces of the colonists haunted her thoughts. Families she had met during the journey to Station Harmony. Children who had been excited about seeing alien worlds. Ambassador Keflar, please send this message to Queen Sarah, Sarah said, her voice steady and cold. Humanity considers itself in a state of war with the Outer Rim separatists, effective immediately. We will accept nothing less than their complete surrender or total destruction. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. Keflar's scales had shifted to a deeper blue, which Dr. Foster's cultural briefings had indicated meant confusion or distress among his species. Captain Chun, he said carefully, I believe there has been a serious misunderstanding. You cannot simply declare war without following proper protocols. There must be negotiations, limited objectives, predetermined cessation conditions. No negotiations, Sarah interrupted. No limited objectives. No cessation conditions except their surrender or elimination. They attacked our people. They killed our families. That means they die. But the Codex of Civilized Warfare, Keflar began. We never signed your codex, Sarah replied. We have our own rules for war, and they're very simple. When someone attacks us, we destroy them completely. Dr. Foster was frantically taking notes, trying to understand the cultural implications of what was happening. Captain, perhaps we should consult with Earth Command before making such declarations. Sarah shook her head. Earth Command gave me full authority to respond to threats against human civilians. This is my decision, and I'm making it now. The news of humanity's declaration spread through Station Harmony within hours. Diplomats from across the galaxy gathered in emergency sessions, trying to understand what the humans meant by total war. The concept was so alien to their experience that most assumed it was a translation error. General Mordak of the Korthak, Hegemony requested an immediate meeting with the human delegation. His massive frame filled the conference room as he tried to explain galactic military traditions. Captain Chun, he said earnestly, your anger is understandable. The death of civilians always demands response. But you must understand, wars are not fought for total destruction. They are contests with rules, objectives, and limits. Why? Sarah asked simply. The question seemed to surprise him. Because unlimited warfare leads to the destruction of civilizations. Entire species could be wiped out. The economic cost would be staggering. The cultural loss immeasurable. Then they shouldn't have attacked us, Sarah replied. But surely you can see the wisdom of restraint, General Morduk pressed. A limited response serves justice while preventing escalation. The Separatists have offered appropriate restitution. General, Sarah interrupted, let me explain something about humans. When someone kills our children, we don't negotiate. We don't accept apologies. We don't take money. We eliminate the threat permanently. The alien general stared at her for a long moment. You would destroy an entire civilization over a single incident? We would destroy an entire civilization to prevent them from killing more of our children, Sarah corrected. And that's exactly what we're going to do, as word spread through the galaxy. The reaction was uniform. Disbelief. Species that had fought dozens of limited wars couldn't comprehend what the humans were proposing. The idea of actually trying to eliminate an enemy completely was so foreign to their experience that most dismissed it as impossible posturing. Queen Sarah herself sent a personal message to Captain Chun, expressing bewilderment at humanity's response. We have offered you everything that galactic law requires, she chittered through the translation system. What more could you possibly want? Sarah's response was broadcast across all galactic frequencies. We want you gone. All of you. Forever. You can surrender and accept exile from the galaxy, or we can remove you ourselves. Those are your only choices. The galaxy waited for this obvious bluff to collapse under the weight of reality. No species had ever seriously attempted to eliminate another from existence. It was simply not done among civilized peoples. They were about to learn that humans had a very different definition of civilization than the rest of the galaxy. The human battle fleet emerged from faster than light, travel at the edge of separatist space like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Elena Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching her tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Behind her, 12 other vessels maintained perfect formation, each one bristling with weapons that had been designed for a very different kind of warfare than the galaxy practiced. Admiral, called Commander Singh from the weapons station. All ships report ready for combat operations. Target acquisition systems are online. Torres nodded. Signal the fleet. Operation Clean Sweep begins now. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations tracked the human fleet's movements with growing alarm. The ships themselves were wrong by galactic standards. Too heavily armed, too heavily armored. Built like mobile fortresses instead of the graceful vessels used for civilized warfare. General Morduk stood in the Korthik Command Center, studying sensor readings with increasing disbelief. How many weapons does one ship need? He muttered to his aide. The aide checked his calculations again. Sir, each human vessel carries approximately 40 times the firepower of our largest battleships. Their smallest escort ship has more destructive capacity than our entire Fifth Fleet. That cannot be correct, Morduk replied. No species builds ships like that. The resource cost would be astronomical. But the sensors did not lie. The human ships were floating arsenals, designed by a species that viewed warfare as a problem to be solved through overwhelming application of force. On the edge of separatist territory, Queen Sarah received her first reports of the approaching human fleet with confused irritation. 13 ships? She chittered to her military council. They send 13 ships against our entire civilization? This is insulting. Her chief admiral, a scarred veteran of dozens of limited conflicts, studied the tactical data with growing concern. Your Majesty, something is wrong with these readings. Either our sensors are malfunctioning, or these ships carry impossible amounts of firepower. Impossible how? The Queen demanded. Each vessel appears to carry enough weapons to reduce a planet to rubble. The Admiral replied quietly. Queen Sarah's compound eyes focused sharply on her subordinate. You are mistaken. No civilized species build such weapons. It would violate every principle of proportional warfare. She was about to discover that humans had never accepted the galaxy's definition of proportional warfare. The first engagement occurred at Kepler 442, a minor separatist supply depot built into an asteroid field. The facility was defended by a standard garrison, 12 patrol ships, orbital defense platforms, and a small ground installation. According to galactic warfare doctrine, it should have required a careful siege lasting several weeks to capture. The human fleet arrived at the outer edge of the system and immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention separatist forces." Admiral Torres's voice echoed across space. "You have 30 minutes to evacuate all civilian personnel from this system. Any military vessels or installations remaining after that time will be destroyed. This is your only warning." The separatist commander, Captain Vesta, responded with standard diplomatic protocol. "Human vessels. This is a sovereign separatist facility operating under the protection of the Codex of Civilized Warfare. We demand you identify your tactical objectives and propose terms for limited engagement." Torres's response was immediate and chilling. "Captain, you killed our people. We have no tactical objectives except your complete elimination. Evacuation begins now or we start shooting in 30 minutes. For 29 minutes, Captain Vesta sent increasingly desperate messages to Queen Sira asking for guidance. The humans made no move to approach the facility, no attempt to establish siege positions, no effort to begin the careful maneuvering that characterized galactic warfare. They simply waited at exactly 30 minutes. Every human ship opened fire simultaneously. The barrage that followed defied every assumption about space combat held by galactic civilization. Instead of carefully targeted shots designed to disable enemy vessels while preserving valuable infrastructure, the humans unleashed a storm of destruction that made the very concept of restraint meaningless. Patrol ships were not damaged or disabled. They were vaporized. Defense platforms did not surrender when overwhelmed. They ceased to exist. The asteroid that housed the supply depot was not captured or occupied. It was reduced to component atoms. The entire engagement lasted 11 minutes. When the weapon's fire stopped, Kepler 442 contained nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas and scattered debris. Not a single human ship had taken damage. Not a single shot had been fired in response. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as sensor recordings of the battle spread through communication networks. Military analysts across hundreds of worlds tried to understand what they had witnessed. "They destroyed everything," whispered Dr. Yelzina from her observation post at the Pacifist Coalition. "They did not try to capture anything. They did not take prisoners. They simply annihilated." The reports reaching Queen Sira's throne room were initially dismissed as censor errors or propaganda. No species actually fought that way. It was wasteful, brutal, and completely unnecessary. Then the human fleet moved to the next target. The Tau Ceti research station was home to 3,000 separatist scientists and their families. It had never been a military target in any previous conflict. Scientific installations were considered off-limits by galactic convention. Admiral Torres broadcast the same 30-minute warning. This time, the evacuation was immediate and complete. Every transport ship in the system was pressed into service as civilians fled in absolute terror. Word of what had happened at Kepler 442 had reached them, and none doubted that the humans meant exactly what they said. The research station was empty when the human ships arrived. It was destroyed anyway, along with the orbital shipyards and mining facilities that supported it. "They are not trying to conquer us," reported General Ziktar to Queen Sira after the third system fell. "They are trying to erase us. Every installation destroyed. Every piece of infrastructure eliminated. They want to remove any trace that we ever existed in those systems. Queen Sira finally began to understand the true scope of what was happening. How long until they reached the core worlds? At their current pace? General Jiktar checked his tactical projections. 72 hours. Maybe less. Our fleets? I've engaged them twice, the general admitted reluctantly. Total casualties. Them. 0. U.S. Complete destruction of both battle groups. The Queen's throne room fell silent, except for the clicking of her nervous attendants. In 3 days, the human fleet had accomplished what should have taken years of careful siege warfare. They had not captured territory. They had sterilized it. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Ambassador Keffler stood before representatives of 800 species, all struggling to comprehend what was unfolding. The humans are not following any recognized form of warfare, he reported. They make no attempt to minimize casualties. They show no interest in capturing resources. They appear to be treating this conflict as... He paused, searching for words. As an extermination. Representative Thox from the warrior clans spoke for many when he asked, "How is this possible? How does a species develop such weapons? Such tactics?" Dr. Foster had requested permission to address the council. She stood slowly, her face pale with the weight of what she had to explain. "Honored representatives," she began, "I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about human military doctrine. You have assumed that we fight wars the same way you do, as limited conflicts with political objectives." She activated a holographic display showing Earth's history. Images of ancient battles, medieval sieges, and modern warfare filled the chamber. "Humans do not fight wars," she continued quietly. "Humans fight for survival. When our people are threatened, we do not seek limited victory or political advantage. We seek the complete elimination of the threat." The display showed mushroom clouds rising over destroyed cities, vast armies clashing across continents, entire civilizations falling to military conquest. "Our weapons are designed to destroy cities because we have fought wars where destroying cities was necessary," Dr. Foster explained. "Our ships carry such firepower because we learned that overwhelming force ends conflicts faster and more permanently than limited engagement." She paused, looking around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces showing expressions, ranging from horror to fascination. "You created the Codex of civilized warfare because you wanted to limit the damage of conflict," she concluded. "We never needed such a codex because we learned to end conflicts so completely that they could never happen." Again, Admiral Torres' final broadcast reached Queen Sira 6 hours before the human fleet arrived at the Separatist homeworld. The message was simple and terrifying. "Your Majesty, you have one last chance. Complete surrender and permanent exile from galactic space, or we will do to your homeworld what we have done to your colonies. You have 2 hours to decide." Queen Shira stared at the tactical display showing 13 human ships approaching her world. Behind those ships lay the remains of 17 star systems, not conquered, not occupied, but completely sterilized of any Separatist presence. Queen Sira's surrender reached the human fleet with 23 minutes remaining on Admiral Torres' ultimatum. The transmission was brief, formal, and complete. "Admiral Torres of the human fleet." The Queen's voice carried exhaustion and defeat. "The Outer Rim Separatists formally surrender all territorial claims and accept permanent exile from galactic space. We will depart immediately and never return. Please, please spare my people." Torres read the message twice before responding. "Your surrender is accepted. You have 72 hours to evacuate your homeworld and any remaining colonies. After that time, Any separatist presence in galactic space will be considered hostile and eliminated. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations tracked the fastest mass evacuation in recorded history. Millions of separatists fled toward the galactic rim in whatever ships they could find, carrying only what they could pack in desperate haste. They left behind centuries of civilization, entire worlds of infrastructure, and any hope of returning to the only home their species had ever known. The human fleet did not pursue them. It simply waited, maintaining position until the last refugee ship crossed the galactic boundary. Only then did Admiral Torres give the order that ended the shortest war in galactic history. Mission accomplished. All targets neutralized. The separatist threat to human civilians has been permanently eliminated. The war had lasted 96 hours from first engagement to final surrender. 3 days later, Captain Sarah Chun stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The Great Hall buzzed with tension as representatives from hundreds of worlds tried to process what had just occurred. Ambassador Kethlar called the session to order, his blue scales noticeably darker than usual. Captain Chun, you have been asked to address this council regarding the recent conflict with the Outer Rim separatists. Sarah stood calmly at the central podium, surrounded by alien faces showing expressions ranging from awe to horror to barely concealed fear. The human response was necessary and proportional. She began without preamble. The separatists attacked our civilians. We eliminated them as a threat. The matter is now closed. Representative Thox from the warrior clans was the first to speak. Captain, what you call proportional, we call genocide. An entire civilization has been driven into exile. An entire civilization that chose to attack human families, Sarah replied evenly. We gave them the opportunity to surrender. They chose exile over extinction. Many species in human history were not given that choice. Dr. Yelzina from the Pacifist Coalition stood shakily. How can you speak so casually about destroying civilizations? The loss of life, the cultural devastation. 17 separatist installations were eliminated, Sarah stated. 0 civilian casualties because we gave them time to evacuate. Compare that to the 847 humans they murdered without warning. Which response shows more respect for life? The chamber fell silent as the mathematics of human warfare sank in. Despite the overwhelming destruction, the humans had actually killed fewer people than the separatists. General Mordok of the Korthak hegemony leaned forward in his massive seat. Captain Chun, we must address the fundamental issue here. Your species has demonstrated military capabilities that render the codex of civilized warfare meaningless. What guarantee do we have that humanity will not turn this power against other species? Sarah considered the question carefully. General, in human history, peaceful species that did not attack us were left in peace. Aggressive species that threatened us were eliminated. The choice has always been yours. But surely you understand our concern, pressed Ambassador Kethlar. Your weapons, your tactics, they represent a complete rejection of everything we have built here. No, Sarah corrected. They represent a different solution to the same problem. You created rules to limit warfare because you wanted to preserve civilizations. We created weapons to end warfare because we wanted to preserve our people. Both approaches work, but they are not compatible. Dr. Foster, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally stood to address the council. Honored representatives, I believe we need to address the fundamental misunderstanding that led to this crisis. She activated a holographic display showing the aftermath of various human conflicts throughout history. What you call total war, humans call a solution. When the Romans conquered their enemies completely, those territories remained peaceful for centuries. When the Allies defeated the Axis powers absolutely, Germany and Japan became peaceful democracies. Thorough victory creates lasting peace. The image is shifted to show the galaxy's recent conflicts. Your codex creates perpetual low-level warfare. The Zephyrians and Crystalline Confederacy have been fighting the same war for 100 years because neither side can win decisively. The Separatists rebelled every few years because they knew the consequences were manageable. What you call barbaric, Dr. Foster concluded, we call efficient. Queen Mother Veltha of the Hive Collective raised a crystalline appendage. Dr. Foster, are you suggesting that our entire approach to warfare is flawed? I'm suggesting that it's designed for species that want to fight limited wars forever, Dr. Foster replied. Humans prefer to fight one terrible war that ends the problem permanently. The debate continued for hours, but the fundamental reality was clear. The galaxy now contained a species that viewed war as something to be won completely rather than managed indefinitely. Over the following weeks, the implications became apparent. Several minor territorial disputes that had simmered for decades were suddenly resolved through negotiation rather than ritual warfare. Nobody wanted to risk drawing humanity's attention to their conflicts. The Crystalline Confederacy formally ended their century-long war with the Zephyrians, citing changed circumstances in the galactic political environment. Both sides quietly agreed that their ritualized battles seemed absurd in a universe where wars could end in 4 days. Through total victory. Other species began requesting human military advisors, wanting to understand how such devastating efficiency was possible. A few tried to acquire human weapons technology, but were politely refused. Our weapons are designed for our way of fighting, Admiral Torres explained to a delegation from the Rigel Defense Forces. They would be wasted in limited conflicts. You fight wars like chess matches. We fight wars like wars. The most significant change came from the Galactic Council itself. Ambassador Kethler proposed a new addition to the Codex of Civilized Warfare, immediately dubbed the Human Clause by diplomatic observers. Article 57, he read to the assembled council. In any conflict involving species that do not recognize the authority of this codex, all parties are advised that traditional rules of engagement may not apply. Extreme caution is recommended before initiating hostilities with such species. The clause passed by unanimous vote. In the weeks that followed, humanity settled into its new role as the galaxy's most feared military power. Paradoxically, this made the galaxy more peaceful than it had been in centuries. Species that had grown comfortable with limited conflicts suddenly found themselves reconsidering whether their territorial disputes were worth risking human intervention. The final irony came when several species began adopting elements of human military doctrine. The warrior clans of Rigel redesigned their entire fleet for decisive engagement rather than prolonged conflict. The Crystalline Confederacy developed new weapons designed to end wars quickly rather than manage them indefinitely. We have learned something important from humanity, General Mordak admitted during a private conversation with Admiral Torres. Limited warfare only works when everyone agrees to the limits. When someone chooses to fight without limits, they will always defeat those who impose restrictions on themselves. Torres nodded. That's why we never agreed to your restrictions in the first place. Wars are not games to be played by rules. They are problems to be solved permanently. The galaxy entered a new age where peace was maintained not through careful management of conflict, but through the knowledge that some conflicts could not be managed at all, only won or lost completely. On Earth, the news of humanity's first interstellar war was met with surprise but not shock. The tactics used were restrained by human standards. No civilian targets, time allowed for evacuation, and the enemy given opportunity to surrender. Could have been worse, commented General Harrison. reviewing Admiral Torres's after-action report. At least we didn't have to use the planet crackers. In the depths of space, the Outer Rim Separatists established a new civilization beyond the Galactic Rim. They built their society around a single principle: never again would they allow themselves to encounter the species called humanity. Queen Syrah, now styling herself as an exile rather than a ruler, issued a final message to the galaxy before cutting all communications. We learned too late that there are species in this universe who view war differently than civilized beings. The humans do not fight wars as we understand them. They do not seek victory in battle. They seek the elimination of their enemies as living concerns. Be warned, they call this mercy because they could have chosen extinction instead. The message was archived in the Galactic Council's database under critical military intelligence.